Hello and welcome to the From My Perspective podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Marshall, and I'm joined here with a good friend of mine, Joshua Gibbs. Say hi to the people, Josh.
Good morning, people of YouTube.
And we have a lot of basketball topics today, regarding from the Big 3 League to the NBA draft, all the way over to the upcoming free agency. And without further ado, let's dive right into it with the Big 3 League debut. It debuted last night. Basically, it's a 3v3 league with a 14-second shot clock. Once the team gets to 30, it goes to halftime, and the first team to 60 wins the game. It's a pretty interesting concept, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. I feel that if the level of competition is high, then you'll get a good product out of the people that are participating, like the legends and veterans. I think if they bring the same level of competition they were in the NBA, then the fans will enjoy it.
And I think they made a pretty bad business decision last night by not airing the debut of the league live on TV, but you'll be able to watch it tonight on FS1. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I think the debut is always when you're gonna get the most ratings, especially when it's something new like this and it's very experimental. So they definitely should have showed it the first night, but at least you will get to see it. It'll be the same first game.
Yeah, they'll be showing the game from last night tonight.
Okay,
it's on TV.
Well, at least you will get a chance to see it.
And 3v3 is becoming a big thing. As you know, it is an Olympic sport in 2020. And it's a chance for non-pros to compete for a gold medal playing basketball. So, in 3v3, it's growing. You have a new professional league for it, and it's an Olympic sport now. I don't know how long it's going to be an Olympic sport.
Well, I think it being an Olympic sport would draw more competition and more players.
Countries like Serbia who specialize in 3-on-3 basketball.
Yeah,
that's big in Serbia, and then you have Americans who usually play 5-on-5, but
it'll be an adjustment. So I think it will grow.
It forces you to play defense. You can't really hide defenders on 3v3.
Yeah,
but that's all for 3v3. We're going to switch it all over to the NBA draft winners and losers. I still believe from my past video that the Knicks and Bulls, especially the Bulls, are serious losers. And I don't quite see why people are calling the Celtics losers. They needed scoring. They didn't make a bad deal. They took Jason Tatum, who can score. It reminds me a lot of Paul Pierce. I'm not saying it's going to be Paul Pierce. I know what you think. I'm not saying it's going to be Paul Pierce. But his game, if you watch Paul Pierce in Kansas and Jason Tatum at Duke, they're very similar.
Yeah, they both. Well, I do believe the Knicks and Bulls are the biggest losers. Because for the Bulls, you lost your youngest star player, your franchise player, the person who can play both offense and defense at a high level. He carried you through the season. Without him, wouldn't have been in the playoffs for him. And the Knicks are losers because they really didn't get enough talent for the pick they had.
They passed on Dennis Smith.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't get a player worth their pick.
All right.
Which could be said for a good amount of teams, but the Knicks needed a very good player, and they did. They got a very average player for their pick. And I think the Celtics picked a good player. Like I told you from the beginning when I found out that the Celtics had the number one pick, that they should trade it because they don't need a number one caliber player because they have Isaiah Thomas. They have enough guards, and those were the potential two top picks with guards. So, you have Avery Bradley, Marcus Smart, Isaiah Thomas, really good caliber guards. So you need a small forward. And with Jason Tatum, you get a small forward that can shoot, has a great length, jumping ability. He might need to get his weight up, stay in the gym a little bit. But he has great potential because the backup position is open, and I think he's going to feel it great.
In the age of positionless basketball, he may be able to move to the 2 or the 4. Or,
he has the shooting potential
with Gordon Hayward.
Yeah, well, that's if you get him, which is another topic we'll talk about later.
But we're going to go back to the Minnesota. They were clearly winners. But the Bulls were just hoodwinked in this trade. Yeah. And the more I look at it, the more upset I get if I were a Bulls fan. You got Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and Lauri Markkanen. Not bad, but you also gave up the 16th pick. And gave up a quality player like Justin Patton. Big guy, he could rebound, he has length. But I don't see how, in this deal, it was bad enough, but you also gave them your draft pick.
Yeah, Minnesota definitely came out a huge winner. Might have been bigger than, getting a Markelle Fultz or Alonzo Ball because they got a proven star, all-star. He has big game potential, make multiple game winners this season, last season. he's going to continue to become a better player with Minnesota.
Of course.
He's under his former coach, so the relationship is strong. So Tom Thibodeau also knows how he wants to use him. That's a big reason why they got him. And they didn't give up a lot for him. Like a pick.
Chris Dunn played horribly last year.
Didn't play a lot of minutes. But they'll get a point guard, which is, I think, a better Rondo right now.
Who?
Ricky Rubio. I think he's better because he has a tendency, he can shoot high. Very good IQ. I think he's the Rondo of this generation.
That's fair.
But with maybe a slightly better jump. Yeah, with a slightly better jump shot because he has a great IQ, a very good passer, and can still shoot the ball. But that's not his tendency, like Rondo used to be with the Boston Celtics. So I think Jimmy Butler would fit great with him because it's not like you're losing or have to.
And now you have Ricky Rubio. You can flip Jimmy Butler and Andrew Wiggins at the 2 and 3.
Yeah.
I would
put Jimmy Butler at the 3 because he's a better defender.
Too. I would put Jimmy at the 3. But they're literally a shooter away from being a serious threat. And you can say this for everyone. I always say this, but put Klay Thompson in Minnesota. Give him a number 1 scoring option.
I think with them getting Jimmy Butler, I definitely see them making the playoffs because you look at Portland, just squeaked in last year. Their roster, you can argue, is better than Portland's now.
I would.
Because Karl Anthony Towns is definitely
better than Jusuf Nurkic.
Yeah, you can argue he's maybe a top 5 center in the league. Then you add another top 10 shooting guard and a top 10 young prospect still on the rise in Andrew Wiggins. And then you have a real solid point guard. This team is still growing. Exactly. This team is built nicely. And, only lose basically a high flyer. Even though Zach LaVine
coming off an ACL tear, too, so you don't know how he'll respond from that.
Yeah.
And if you had to name 3 teams on the rise, mine are Boston, Philly, and Minnesota. If you had to pick 3 teams that are on the rise, who would you pick? Because clearly Boston is ahead of these teams, but they're still on the rise.
I think in some aspects, but I definitely think Minnesota's definitely on there. You have to think of young teams. Philly, I think they're the number 1 team on the rise because, they're about to get Ben Simmons back, and I think he's a very similar player to Lonzo Ball, just with less of a jump shot, and he's a bigger player. So you're talking about a forward who can handle and, take some pressure off of Markelle Fultz that can just be a shooting guard and,
right.
Shoot and, drive to the basket.
They said they were going to play him at the 1 next year, Ben Simmons.
That might translate good because we've seen how Antetokounmpo is translated at a big guard position.
Right.
So that might translate well. But, they're definitely on the rise because they have all young talent. Now, I think the ceiling is high for Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz. Now, if Ben Simmons performs at a high level, they might be another team that makes the playoffs.
Right. The Sixers are definitely going to make the playoffs down the line. They're going to be championship contenders in my opinion.
This year.
Oh.
If Ben Simmons performs at a high level this year, they, I think, have a chance of making the playoffs.
If they can stay healthy, Embiid, Saric, 2 Rookie of the Year candidates. Ben Simmons is probably going to win Rookie of the Year next year. And then Markelle Fultz.
They definitely have a high ceiling. But it all, depends on health and how well they perform. Because, most of these players haven't played, enough games to say, they're going to be great.
And Fultz is just a natural scorer. He's going to come out the gate giving you 18, at least 18 a game.
Especially with, that roster.
With the freedom to shoot on that roster like that.
At least, 16 to 18 points easy. Because he has a nice shooting ability, too.
And I wouldn't be surprised to see him get 20 a game with that roster, when you're the number 1 scoring option. But yeah, we're going to move on to the latest on Paul George. The latest report is the Cavs, Nuggets, and Pacers are all in 3-way talks right now. The trade would send Cleveland, Paul George, and Kenneth Faried, and Denver would get Kevin Love. And there's nothing yet reported on what Indiana would get, but I would likely say draft picks down the line. And this is what me and you debated actually last night, was where I was saying that if I'm Indiana, draft picks are all I really want. I don't want a bad contract like Shumpert. I don't really want Channing Frye. I'm rebuilding. So what would they get from Cleveland or Denver? Because Jusuf Nurkic, Nikola Jokic is not trading. Emmanuel Mudiay would likely not be involved in the trade. And Cleveland's not going to give up Kyrie or LeBron. So what do you really want from these two teams if you're Indiana?
Well, if I'm the Cavs, you look at Paul George and see a big name. You see a star beside his name, all-star, a USA player. So you definitely get talent. But I feel like if you lose Kevin Love, you lose way too much when you're talking about the race between the Cavs and the Warriors.
You lose shooting, and that's what you need to keep
You
up with
lose
the
shooting
Warriors.
and rebounding. Because with Paul George, you lose height and strength. And that's huge for, the rebounding aspect. Because if you go too small with the Warriors, you will still end up a loser. Because the Warriors have a balance between
You're
small
not going to beat
and
them
height.
at their own game.
Exactly. And teams get lost doing that. And that's why most teams are lost when trying to rebuild their team, because they're thinking about the Warrior style of play. But there's no amount of shooting you can get to match the Warriors. So I don't think the Cavs would be a better fit for Paul George, because they would just lose too much, and they would lose a pretty solid defender.
But Denver in this trade would make out. I would take this deal. Whatever draft picks you want, I'd give Kevin Love next to Nikola Jokic.
That would work in Denver's perspective. But I also think the Pacers would lose, because if I'm the Pacers, I would like something for like a player for Paul George. Because Jeff Teague, as I predicted, didn't show much. That's why the Hawks got rid of him. Because I started to see how he started to be timid and playing, didn't take a lot of shots, very selective in what he wanted to do, was, and Dennis Schroeder just showed how he had more confidence. So I didn't think Jeff Teague was going to be that good of a point guard in Indiana. So, getting a Jordan Clarkson, who's very, confident, aggressive.
And we'll talk about that just down the line in a couple of minutes.
Yes, I think the Lakers would be a better fit for Paul George. And if I'm Indiana, I would want players because, to fill the gap. Right. And, some players, depending on the trade, have a roughly good contract under this new CBA.
And then, because you say the LA Lakers are the best fit, I say the LA Clippers are the best fit for Paul George, because if you can land Paul George, I'm all but guaranteeing Blake Griffin and Chris Paul will come back.
Yeah, because they'll see the potential.
Right, now you have the lineup. You have no cap space whatsoever. But now you have the lineup of Chris Paul, Jamal Crawford, his name escaped my mind, Paul George, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. You have no bench.
Yeah, because they would have to go all in.
To the Warriors, and
they would have to lose J.J. Redick, because he's going to find money somewhere.
Right. Someone's going to offer him a lot of money. He's a shooter. He's needed.
Yeah.
So you would replace J.J. Redick with Jamal Crawford, and that five alone can give the Warriors problems.
Yeah, but the Warriors also excel at their bench. Like, their bench can go a span of 5 minutes doing a nice, solid job of keeping a lead. Like, if Warriors give it maybe an 8-point lead, 5 minute span, it'll probably be a 6-point lead.
Right.
And then you can put the starters back out there.
And in order for the Clippers to get Paul George, you likely have to empty out your bench too. Players like Austin Rivers would have to go, and Luke Mbah-a-Moute would have to go, and players like that. But if you're Indiana, we kind of already touched on this, you would take the Lakers trade, which is probably going to be Julius Randle, who's a restricted free agent next year, Jordan Clarkson, and a 2019 Lakers first round.
Yeah, and I especially think if the Lakers offer another pick, the deal has to be done. Because you get, two nice, solid, young players that have a really good ceiling if given the right circumstances under a team that have freedom. Like, I think
Clarkson's contract is a steal. 4 years,
yes.
$50 million, second year in. Under the new CBA, that's a pretty good contract to be under.
Yes, like when you think of players like, because I'm a Heat fan, you think of players like Tyler Johnson, who's under a 4-year, $50 million deal. I think Jordan Clarkson has the same type of ceiling as a Tyler Johnson, because they're both aggressive. And Jordan Clarkson has a height advantage. Both attack the rim nice. Both have nice shooting. I think that would be a really nice. And you can even, I argue that you can even move Jordan Clarkson to a starting position, give or take Jeff Teague.
Especially in Indiana, because
yes, Jeff Teague's position is.
I don't know
uncertain.
Jeff Teague's future if you decide to blow it up. But my number one problem is I don't want to dish out that kind of money to Julius Randle. You're gonna have to pay him next summer, probably $80 to $90 million. I can't wrap my head around paying a player who hasn't really proven much $90 million.
Well, if you look at his ceiling, like, that is a huge reason why the deal could be worth it. Because if you pair up the backcourt of Julius Randle and Miles Turner, two young, very exciting players to watch because of their athleticism.
Right.
Julius Randle could bring the ball up, and that's, young backcourts that they both can jump. I think that causes problems for teams because the athleticism factor alone. And then imagine if Julius Randle finds a shot. Now you have two bigs that can shoot because Miles Turner can step behind the 3-point arc and hit some jump shots. So I think it would be depending on his season this year. And if he goes to Indiana, I think he'll definitely, improve his numbers.
Of course, yeah. He'll become, probably a second or third option in Indiana behind Clarkson, let's say a Teague or someone. Because if they're blowing it up, they're going to get rid of more than just Paul George.
Yes, I definitely think, depending how this season works, that Indiana have no other position but to sign him a pretty heavy contract. But if I would give him maybe a 4-year, maybe $70 million.
Yeah. You got to get him to take that. Other teams are going to throw more money at him.
Yeah.
You got to get him not to sign that. That way you can avoid matching it. But you can sign. They'll probably sign him during the season.
And then he's restricted, so.
Right. But you want to avoid getting in a bidding war and having to match one of those contracts.
Yeah, but like I said, I still think the Lakers are the best fit because they offer young potential and 2 draft picks. And then, Paul George already wants to be there, so he's probably going to lean on that deal more so than any other team.
Right.
And then, the picks that the Lakers would give are good almost immediately. They're not
going to be competing for a championship next year, even with Paul George.
Yeah, they'll probably sneak the playoffs with Paul George and their new roster.
They'll run into Golden State or someone. San Antonio get bounced round 1.
Yeah, but that's a guaranteed top 15 pick easy.
Right.
For the next 2-3 years. So that's a good pick for what you get.
Well, we all know Boston's probably going to pass on Paul George. They do have 6 first-round picks in the next 2 years, and they have a lot of valuable players, young players. Jay Crowder, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Avery Bradley, Isaiah Thomas, Jason Tatum. I don't see them trading Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, or Isaiah Thomas. But if you just look
I also don't see, depending on the price, they might not trade Avery Bradley because I think he's such an elite defender.
Two-way player.
Yes, he's such a two-way player.
Nowadays.
Yes. He is the Klay Thompson of that team, a great two-way player, and he also, really shown his shooting prowess in the playoffs.
And after signing Gordon Hayward, that's my number one. If I'm Boston, I don't make any trades until I sign Gordon Hayward. That way to avoid, conflicting with the cap. I say they sign Gordon Hayward, then go all in on Anthony Davis because if the Pelicans aren't winning next year, Anthony Davis is going to want out because DeMarcus Cousins can go to free agency next year. Which means if he publicly demands a trade like Paul George has done, then his value drops. Now you're going to be stuck in an Indiana-like position where you're not going to get everything that you could have got for him, and it's going to slow down your rebuild in all reality. So I think once they sign Gordon Hayward, Danny Ainge calls up New Orleans, and I like making trades and stuff, but I think this is a realistic trade that can meet both teams' demands. And the Pelicans would get the 2018 Celtics and Lakers pick, 2019 Clippers first round, small forward Jay Crowder, point guard Terry Rozier, and the newly drafted Tatum Allen out of Arizona. And the Celtics would get Anthony Davis. Is that a fair deal to you? That's 3 draft picks, a quality player like Jay Crowder. Danny Ainge is very high on Terry Rozier, so there's something we must not see as fans. And then you get a guard like Tatum Allen to help groom whatever way you want.
I think that's fair on paper, but you have to look at the picks themselves because I know the pick you traded for, if it's not
2 through 5, it goes to Sacramento's 2019. So they'll get, instead of getting 2 picks in next year, they get 2 picks in 2019.
Yeah, so it all depends on how they feel about the picks. But on paper that sounds quality.
And you can always flip one of those out and maybe throw in a Brooklyn pick. I'm cheap with draft pick. You know how I am. But I wouldn't mind flipping the Celtics for a Brooklyn pick and getting the deal done.
Yeah, but with Anthony Davis, I don't know if, depending on how the Cavs look, because they look shaky right now, especially with all their contract problems right now.
Right.
So, getting an Anthony Davis might help y'all really good with Al Horford and him work, though.
Al Horford, he could play, you can lead, Al Horford, he can stretch the floor. He's a stretch 5. And you can let Anthony Davis roam the paint because he has nice mid-range and obviously dominates the paint. You can have Al Horford, space out. Give Anthony Davis someone to pass to.
And I think that's a huge problem with why the Pelicans isn't working.
Right. They both are solid mid-range inside players in DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis, so it becomes cluttered after a while.
Yeah.
Their numbers look great, but the team's win-loss record doesn't look great when they play. And that's why I think DeMarcus Cousins may look to get out of there this summer, which can spell trouble for the Pelicans. So this is why they should just get as much as they can for Anthony Davis right now, then waiting for him to demand a trade and then being stuck, trying to in an Indiana-like position.
Yeah. So, like, on paper, like I said, that sounds good if you're the Pelicans. Like, you definitely need guard play.
Right.
So, I think a Terry Rozier would help. And a Jay Crowder, definitely, because he's also a pretty good two-way player. But he would need a point guard to give him the ball because he's not an isolation
he doesn't
player.
create, right.
Yeah.
And we're going to go over to free agency. We have a couple of players. Obviously, Gordon Hayward. He's heavily rumored and probably will likely end up in Boston. I know you want him in Miami.
Because as you know, a Boston fan, they don't, and as reporters, they don't bring up the fact that Miami has just as good of a chance as Boston. Even the Jazz have said they fear he's leaving for the Heat just like Boston. Like, the chances of him leaving to the Heat
Well, if
are
Gordon
just
wants
as
to
strong.
go win right now, I don't see why you would go to Miami.
Well, we have a structured defensive core. That's our culture. Our defense is our culture. And that's the reason we came second half and won so many games because of our defense.
Right.
And we didn't have a star. And
But
with the loss of Justice Winslow, we need a score because we can't rely on Whiteside because he can get you maybe about 16 a game. But, we need a legit scorer to score, 20-plus points. And with Dion Waiters, and I told you before the season started, if he averaged 18, we'd make the playoffs. He averaged 16, right?
Yes.
So I think he can make that next step, 2 more points. He didn't play.
It's funny how
fast.
close you were on that, too, because you were Brooklyn tanking a game away from making the playoffs.
Yeah, I told you. If he averaged 18, because I knew the structure we needed was an 18-point score. Gordon Hayward gives you that. And we also have, we're letting go Chris Bosh, sadly. We have the cap. No tax.
But would you pass up playing with Isaiah Thomas, a ton of assets to get someone like an Anthony Davis, Kristaps Porzingis, to go play in Miami if you're Gordon Hayward? If you look at the Celtics' assets alone, they can win now if they wanted to. If Danny Ainge would pull the trigger on some trades, they could win now. They can compete with Cleveland.
Yeah, but I think people underestimate Goran Dragic, though. Because Goran Dragic had a really nice season.
He did.
Yeah, and I think people like to be the man. Like, if he goes to Boston, he's not going to be the man. I think if he goes to Miami, he will be the man. And I think that plays a factor in where people like to go.
I don't really see the need to be the man with Gordon Hayward, though. Like, you can see that with Paul George. You can't really see that with Gordon Hayward.
That's another reason why I don't think the Paul George would work. Because he wants to be the man. That's why he chose L.A. and it's his hometown. And he would be the man. But with Gordon Hayward, I think both of them are a toss-up because they're almost identical in winning. Because I think if he goes to Miami, we become maybe a 45-win team. If he goes to Boston, how many did y'all win this year?
Slips my mind, actually. 50-something. 50-something.
Well, I think if he goes to Boston, they're a 60-win team.
Yes.
So it's like a toss-up in what you want because I don't think... Because Boston's struggle is defense. So if he goes to Miami, he doesn't have the pressure of a defending, because Miami's rotated around more team defense.
Right, and then obviously the Heat does have a better center, and I think Hassan Whiteside is better than Al Horford. But just because he's a defensive anchor in Boston, obviously doesn't have that defensive anchor. We don't have that rim protection,
and he's relied on more to defend. Like when you, because as we know, playing basketball and you have a center who's not a rim protector, is more pressure on us.
Right, as guards.
Because we have to defend and can't let them get by you. If you have a center that can defend and is a rim protector, you can feel more comfortable with just playing a normal defense, and you don't have to overexert yourself.
Yeah, so you can agree. It was 53 wins, by the way. 53.
Okay, so that's like a 62-win team if Gordon Hayward goes.
Yeah, so it's really basically between... If I'm Utah, I'm planning for the worst.
Yeah.
It's basically between Boston and Miami. If I'm Utah, I don't know what I'd do if I'm Utah. Your core is done now.
Yeah, if if Gordon Hayward goes, I'd look to shop maybe some veterans.
Yeah.
They can have Jordan Hill and Joe Johnson. But I think Joe Johnson's under a 2-year. Yeah, Dante Exum, either you give him away or you progress him and make him a really solid player.
And I think we could package the next two together, Blake Griffin and Chris Paul. Obviously, they have different destinations and rumors. Chris Paul has been rumored to be with the Rockets. I think he should go back to the Pelicans. He probably won't, though. And Blake Griffin, he's kind of been rumored with the Celtics here and there. But you don't really see a fit for Oklahoma City. I don't see as a fit for Blake Griffin. Two ball-dominant players with Russell Westbrook and Blake Griffin. I think that would just be a mess waiting to happen. Yeah,
and I think that's, when you bring up ball dominance, I think that's part of the reason he wants to leave LA. Because, Chris Paul is a over ball dominant point guard. And he always has been. not to so much of a fault, but that's just his player type.
Right.
And Blake Griffin will want to handle the ball mid-range and get his own basket, or get a rebound and push it. Russell Westbrook is the person who loves to rebound and push it.
He ran KD out of there doing that.
So I don't know how good OKC would be a fit. I think the names
make it. It'll sell tickets, but it won't win you many games.
Yeah, like you hear Blake Griffin and
Russell Westbrook.
You hear two explosive players, two very good athletes.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. I don't know how much that wins you games because OKC needs shooting.
And they still wouldn't get that with Blake Griffin.
Yes, they don't get marginally better with Blake Griffin.
Right.
So but besides OKC, I don't see many teams pursuing him as hard.
That was what I was about to say. I don't really see anyone other than LA that could really want him. I don't see Miami would be interested. Boston I don't really think would be interested. He's expensive.
Yeah, he's expensive and he's demanding. He wants the ball. He wants to get a 20-plus point game. Like, he wants to average 20 to 25 points a game. He wants that. He wants to be another. He's another person who wants to be the man.
Right.
So he's also expensive. Exactly. So I don't see many teams, and I haven't heard many teams going out for him. So I don't know, what. It's either he's going to have to lower his standards, or I don't know.
He'll probably end up back with the Clippers. But Chris Paul, people are saying Cleveland. He's not going to take league minimum to play with Cleveland.
No, and he's not going to take, a 20-something plus drop to go with the Spurs. I don't think.
No,
that's a lot. That's too much money.
The Spurs would have to clear off Danny Green. Pau Gasol would have to take less. LaMarcus Aldridge had to find someone for him. And if they blow up LaMarcus Aldridge, what's the point in going if you're Chris Paul?
Yeah,
because no one's there. Because Aldridge wants out, so you just be down there by yourself.
And we know, the report is that Pau Gasol did opt out to take a pay cut, but it would be so much they would have to do contract-wise to sign him, and he would still have to take less money. And
then you would lose your shooter in Danny Green in order to make it happen.
Yeah, another two-way player. You're not on the same caliber as Klay Thompson, but, he'll still guard the best player and a really good shooter.
So the Clippers are really lucky right now.
Yeah.
And I don't see him going to Houston with James Harden because that would just ruin James Harden. I mean, he led the league in assists. He is the point guard. So bringing in another point guard...
It's just another name.
Right. It wouldn't do anything. It would fill seats, but it wouldn't win games.
Yeah, and this is another case where the names get you caught up and, he can go to the Rockets and play with James Harden. But, playing style is where the differences are. And I don't see a lot of teams, besides the Rockets and the Spurs, really trying to attack Chris Paul.
Right.
Because I think they understand he's a ball-dominant point guard, and he needs, shooters.
I have heard Denver, though. I don't understand why people are throwing out the word Denver. They're young. Chris Paul is trying to win a championship. I've heard Denver thrown around a couple of times.
Man, I don't know what Denver would appeal to Chris Paul.
And then here's a player that we both like, but I don't think a lot of people know too much about him, is Danilo Gallinari. Will the Nuggets move on from him, speaking of Denver?
I think they will. I don't think they should because he's 6'10", small forward. He can definitely get his own shot.
Right.
He's big. His injuries have set his back.
He's going to cost you long term, though.
Yeah, his injuries have set him back. But I think he still has really good potential in this league to maybe average 16 points a game. I think his career is matching up to a Rudy Gay status right now.
Right.
You can use him in a starting role. He won't have to be relied on too much. But no talk has been about him.
None.
So the question is, what are they going to do with him? And as a Miami fan, that's definitely
I can see him in Miami for the right price, though. For the right price, I can see him in Miami.
Gordon Hayward fails, we should definitely look to take him because, like I said, he can shoot. He's a shooter. He's a shooter. Big. So we can definitely use him, and he can even play. If I think he still could play, stretch four.
Yeah, push come to shove, you can throw him down there with Whiteside in a small ball.
Space the floor, exactly.
Space the floor out.
You have a lineup with Justice Winslow and him playing together, where Goran Dragic can work off ball. I think that will work.
And then Dwayne Wade did opt into his $24 million player option. Do you think the Bulls should buy him out? And do you see him end up going to Cleveland? Because now he's made his $24 million. He was bought out. He has that now. Now will he take league minimum to go play with LeBron and try to bring home a title?
Well, if he did if the Bulls did end up buying him out and he went to Cleveland, I don't think that makes them a better team. He's just at the point of his career, he's just too old. Well, not too old, but he's at an age where
it's not what he used to be.
Yeah, like the Bulls style of play, like they can post them up, but the Warriors are just so young and fast. I don't think by getting older that would help.
Right.
Like that's why people like Channing Frye and Richard Jefferson and Darren Williams didn't excel in the finals, because they were just so old and slowed that they couldn't play at the same speed as the Warriors, and they were ineffective.
And that's why I think the Cavs messed up, trying to match the Warriors' style of play. Instead of playing their style, slow it down, take time off the clock. They tried to match the Warriors' pace.
Yeah, and by getting shooters, they lost defense.
Kyle Korver was, if he's not hitting shots, which he wasn't, he was useless.
Yes, because he was a liability on defense because he couldn't check Klay Thompson. And Klay Thompson was a huge factor because he's just as good as a shooter, but a way better defender.
Right. And that's why more two-way players would be valuable.
Yeah.
Which is why Danny Green in Cleveland would be amazing.
Or, like speculation of Jimmy Butler in Cleveland. That was, that was talk. But, seeing how he went to
the Timberwolves.
Minnesota, yeah. But that would have been, nice. And I don't think getting Paul George is a good enough two-way player. I don't see Paul George as a defender.
More or less.
I think he's more offensive oriented than, a two-way, play both sides of the basketball player.
Speaking of two-way players, I do have one more question I forgot to ask. Do you think Boston passed on Jimmy Butler because Danny Ainge knew he doesn't put them over the edge versus Cleveland? Because if you look at the best two-way players, you have Kevin Durant, Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Klay Thompson. You might even put Avery Bradley. But those
I think if his offensive numbers get better, you can put him in two-way. But, you definitely have Jimmy Butler as a two-way player.
But is he that two-way player that puts you over the edge in terms of beating Cleveland?
I don't think so, because there's not many people who can stop LeBron. That's why LeBron averaged a triple-double in the finals. Like, no one can stop LeBron.
Right.
But at this time, I don't see many players available as Jimmy Butler caliber. Like, Jimmy Butler, the multi-time All-Star, won USA Gold. I don't see many opportunities to get a player like that now. Like, I think it kind of was
Boston's
a pass.
Just waiting it out.
Which isn't that good of a move, because, if you wait it out, other players will get older.
Right.
So you have to strike.
You get older with them.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it was a complete failure, but I do think y'all passed because, there's not many players at Jimmy Butler's caliber that were available.
Right.
You have to.
On a good contract under the new CBA, too.
Yeah. Like, they saw the opportunity and they should have bought in it, because that opportunity, doesn't happen all the time.
Right. Well, there you guys have it today. That was the podcast. I hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time.